Under the vast expanse of an African sky, the horizon trembles with a pulse of life older than memory. The land holds its breath, and the air itself seems to shimmer heavy with anticipation. Somewhere beyond the distant savannah, thunder murmurs, not in anger, but in longing. The rivers stir in their beds, their waters trembling as if sensing a presence that commands both reverence and fear. The wind begins to move, a whisper at first, brushing through the tall grass, carrying the scent of wet earth and distant fire. It is not an ordinary wind. It is the breath of something ancient, something divine. It is the herald of Oya. Before she comes, the world changes. The skies grow darker, the colors deepen, and the heart of nature begins to race. Birds take flight, scattering into the gray, their cries sharp as sparks in the rising storm. Trees bend as though bowing to a queen unseen yet undeniably felt. The river's surface ripples, mirroring the restless spirit that coils above it. The first drop of rain falls, hot, electric, alive. It lands like a heartbeat upon the soil, and the ground answers with a shudder of recognition. Oya is near. No temple can contain her, no prayer can define her. She is the storm before the calm, the tremor before transformation. Her essence dances in the meeting of elements, in the thunder that rolls across the plains, in the wild curve of lightning that carves the heavens open, in the swirl of dust and water as they embrace in chaos and creation. The people who live beneath these skies know her presence well. They say that when the air turns thick and the trees whisper in tongues of fear, Oya is riding the wind. Her laughter echoes in the thunderclaps. Her tears become the rain that nourishes and destroys in equal measure. The world remembers her through motion. She is never still. The wind is her body, the storm her spirit, and through them she breathes life into all that dares to change. For Oya is not merely the mistress of storms. She is the guardian of transformation. She stands at the crossroads where endings meet beginnings, where death kisses rebirth. She carries in her hands both the promise of renewal and the inevitability of loss. Those who worship her do not seek safety, they seek truth. For Oya reveals what the calm hides. Listen closely, and her story begins not in silence, but in the roaring heart of the elements. In the beginning, there was wind before there was word, movement before meaning. It was said that the first storm tore through the heavens to make space for life, and that in the heart of that tempest, Oya was born. She emerged from the union of earth and sky, her cry a thunderclap that scattered darkness like shattered glass. The rivers opened their arms to her, and she moved between them with grace and power, her laughter twining with the wind until even the gods paused to listen.
The sky adored her, the fire envied her, and the earth trembled beneath her feet. Her beauty was not soft, but fierce, like lightning frozen in the moment before it strikes. Her eyes reflected the horizon where dusk and dawn blur together, and her touch carried the dual gift of creation and destruction. Wherever she walked, the air awakened, and the spirits that slept in stones and waters stirred. She was a call to rise, to change, to move. And so the world learned that nothing remains untouched by her breath. The villagers, when they speak of her, do so in hushed reverence. They say she is the mother of 9 children, yet none can claim to know all their names, for each is a facet of her boundless spirit, each a wind that carries her legacy across the world. They tell of nights when her storms dance so wildly that the riverbanks break, and yet by morning the land gleams fertile and renewed. It is in that paradox that her essence lies, in destruction that births life, in endings that are but disguised beginnings. Her presence is not confined to the sky. She moves through dreams, through the shiver that passes over the skin before rain falls, through the sigh of the wind that brushes a lover's cheek in the dark. She is the whisper that urges one to leave what no longer serves them, the silent push toward transformation even when it burns. Those who feel her touch often do not understand it at first. They only know that something within them has begun to shift, to unravel, to awaken. Oya is not gentle. She does not soothe. She stirs. Her storms are mirrors reflecting the turbulence within every soul. In her realm, resistance is futile. To meet her is to confront oneself, to face the winds that tear through the soul and emerge reborn on the other side. And yet within her chaos lies an unexpected tenderness. Her fury is not mindless, it is purposeful. She destroys only what must be shed, clears only what must be renewed. Like the river that floods to carve new paths through the earth, Oya's storms are acts of divine mercy disguised as wrath. There are moments when the world stands on the edge of her coming, the stillness before the wind gathers, before the horizon darkens, and in that fragile pause one can almost feel her eyes upon them. The air grows electric, every breath charged with possibility. In those moments, she whispers through the leaves, her voice a melody both haunting and alluring. Change, my child. Do not cling to what has already died.
It is said that even the gods fear her storms, not because she seeks to overthrow them, but because she embodies what none can escape: transformation. The cycle of life and death moves through her hands as easily as the river through its bed. The ancestors invoke her when the time for endings arrives, when crops must burn so that the soil may live again, when hearts must break to rediscover their rhythm. She is the keeper of that sacred balance, forever dancing on the line between chaos and harmony. But Oya is more than a force of nature. She is emotion made divine. Her storms are not only winds and rains, they are the echoes of her heart. Each lightning bolt a burst of passion, each roll of thunder a cry of longing, each gust of wind a breath of desire unbound. The world moves because she feels, and through her feelings it is reborn. To understand Oya is to understand the heartbeat of existence itself, the endless rhythm of loss and renewal, destruction and creation, sorrow and ecstasy intertwined. When the rain falls heavy and the wind howls through the night, the elders tell the young to listen, truly listen. Beneath the sound of the storm, they say, there is music, the rhythm of her dance, the pulse of her spirit as she moves through the world. Those who can hear it are blessed, for it means she has noticed them. It means that within them burns a storm of their own, waiting to be awakened. And so her myth lives not in temples or scrolls, but in the breath of the world itself. Each gust of wind carries her story. Each clap of thunder speaks her name. The river remembers her footsteps, the lightning her laughter, and the sky itself bends to her will. To speak of Oya is to speak of movement, of passion, of life refusing to remain still. She is the breath before the storm, the shadow before the flame, the goddess who turns destruction into beauty and death into beginning. And though her winds may terrify, they also cleanse. For in every tempest she brings there is a promise, a whisper carried through the chaos, that from the ashes, from the ruins, from the drenched and trembling earth, something new will always rise. Oya is the pulse beneath the storm. She is the horizon that never ceases to change. And as the thunder rolls once more across the distant sky, the world remembers her truth. Chaos is not the end. It is the beginning.
She was the storm given form, beautiful, dangerous, and utterly alive. When Oya moved, the air followed her, trembling with devotion. Her steps left no footprints, only swirls of dust that danced long after she had passed. The wind adored her, the rain sought her touch, and the thunder whispered her name in low, rolling tones. Her body shimmered with the scent of ozone and wild earth, her hair a river of dark coils that moved as if alive, carrying within them the secrets of every storm she had ever birthed. To behold her was to witness contradiction embodied. Her eyes glowed with both tenderness and rage, soft one moment and fierce the next. Within them, whole worlds were born and undone. Her lips could summon a hurricane or silence it with a single breath. Her touch could raise the dead fields to life or strip them bare. She carried destruction and rebirth not as opposites, but as lovers intertwined, inseparable in their dance. Her storms were her voice, her way of being understood by those who could not speak her language. When she loved, the skies burned with color. When she mourned, the world drowned in rain. She did not hide her heart. She wore it as the wind wears the scent of rain, freely, openly, fiercely. Yet there was an ache in her, a longing too deep for the heavens to contain. For all her strength, she remained a creature of desire, desire for connection, for understanding,
for something or someone who could stand within her storm and not falter. It was then that Shango came. He arrived not quietly, but like a flame demanding to be seen. His laughter cracked like thunder, and his presence was heat impossible to ignore, impossible not to feel. He was the embodiment of fire and thunder, the rhythm of drums made flesh, the roar of lightning when it splits the sky. His skin glowed with the warmth of embers, his gaze fierce yet alive with mirth. Where Oya was the storm that moved with the world, Shango was the spark that ignited it. Their first meeting was not peaceful. It was inevitable. She appeared on the edge of a burning plain, where the grass had turned to ash under the weight of his power. Lightning split the air, the heat bending reality itself. And there he stood, laughing amid his own chaos. When their eyes met, the winds stilled, and even the rain hesitated to fall. "Shia, Oya," he said, his voice a rumble that echoed through the clouds. "The skies tremble for you." She smiled, though the storm still raged behind her. "Yet you would burn the world to meet me. Would you not do the same?" He replied, and in that exchange the air between them ignited, not with anger, but with recognition. Fire met wind, passion met freedom, and the world shuddered under the weight of their union. They were kindred forces, each drawn to the other's chaos, each daring the other to surrender, yet neither bowed.
From that moment, their dance began. When Oya swept across the plains, Shango followed in lightning's flash. When he summoned fire from the heavens, she answered with rain, cooling his fury, yet feeding his flame. Together they became the storm entire. He the thunder that roared her name, she the wind that carried his desire. But theirs was no simple love. It was a bond forged in conflict, in the eternal pull between dominance and surrender. To the gods they were all inspiring. To mortals they were both blessing and curse. Villages would pray for their union to pass swiftly, for where they met the world transformed. Crops burned and then grew greener than before. Rivers flooded and then ran clear as crystal. Their love left both ruin and renewal, destruction and blessing intertwined. The people whispered that Oya and Shango did not love as mortals do. They loved as storms love the sky, completely, violently, without restraint. And yet, within their tempest, there were moments of stillness. In the quiet after the thunder, when the rain had softened to a whisper, Oya would look upon Shango and feel the ache that no storm could silence. He, with his laughter and fire, brought warmth to her endless winds, a warmth she both craved and feared. For Oya's heart, though vast as the horizon, was not invulnerable. Her storms hid a longing for peace, a peace she could never fully claim. But Shango understood. He saw in her the same hunger that burned in him, the desire to be known beyond power, beyond legend. And in those rare silences, when the sky blushed with the fading light of dusk, they would speak without words.
The lightning between them softened into a glow, and the wind curled around them like a lover's sigh. Around them the spirits gathered, those who lived between the worlds of storm and flame. They watched with reverence as the two forces danced their eternal duet. Some were ancient river spirits, born from the waters Oya commanded. Others were embers of Shango's fires, flickering souls that once burned bright in the mortal realm. They lingered near their gods, drawn by the beauty and danger of their union. Among the mortals, stories spread. Some said Oya's storms were her tears when Shango left her side. Others claimed that every thunderclap was his call, begging her to return. The truth was neither this nor that, for though their love was unending, it was never still. They were bound by movement, by the need to change, to test, to break and mend again.
Oya, in her solitude, often wandered the places where the wind spoke to her alone. She listened to the earth sigh beneath her feet, to the river hum of old memories. In those moments, she was neither goddess nor storm, but something softer, something human. The mortals who glimpsed her there spoke of her as a vision of impossible beauty, her presence stirring a strange yearning in the heart. Men and women alike found themselves dreaming of her touch, of the sound of her voice carried on the wind. She would appear to them at dusk, when the sky turned copper and the air thickened with the promise of rain. Her eyes would linger on theirs, not as a goddess regarding a worshipper, but as a being seeing another soul. She would not speak, for her silence said everything. Change is coming. Be ready to shed what you must. And when she vanished, the winds would rise, carrying with them both fear and desire, destruction and hope. Even the river spirits whispered of her contradictions. She loves as fiercely as she destroys, they would say, and yet in her fury there is gentleness. For Oya's storms did not strike without purpose. They cleansed, they renewed. And those who had known her touch, be they god, mortal, or spirit, found themselves transformed. Shango, though he burned bright, often sought her winds when his own flame waned. "Without your storm," he once told her, "my flame is but smoke." "And without your fire," she answered, "my winds lose their song." Their union was not perfect, nor was it meant to be. It was divine in its imperfection, a testament to the truth that love, like nature, thrives in contrast. Oya's fury taught Shango humility. His warmth reminded her of tenderness. Together, they embodied the rhythm of existence itself, conflict and desire, loss and renewal, passion and restraint. And so, as the skies roared and rivers rose in song, their story unfolded through every storm that touched the earth. The people did not fear their power, they revered it. For in Oya's gales and Shango's thunder, they saw the reflection of their own hearts, the longing to destroy what no longer serves, and to be reborn in the fire of something greater. Above all, they learned this, that love, when divine, is never still. It is a wind that cannot be captured, a flame that refuses to die. And in the heart of that endless motion,
Oya remains, beautiful, terrible, and free.
The night trembled beneath her breath. The winds had fallen quiet, though not with peace, rather with anticipation, like a lover holding still before the first touch. Oya stood upon the edge of the river, her reflection trembling upon the surface, fractured by the pulse of her own power. Above her, the sky smoldered with distant lightning, each flicker a heartbeat that echoed through her chest. She had called the storm, but did not release it. The world waited, as she did, between restraint and surrender. Her heart ached for something she could not name. She had known the caress of wind, the rush of rain, the warmth of flame, but none had quieted the restlessness that churned inside her. It was not power she sought. She already commanded the skies. What she craved was presence, a soul unafraid to stand in her storm, to see her not as the goddess of destruction, but as the woman who longed to be understood. The wind rose softly, brushing against her skin like a question. It swirled around her ankles, lifting the edge of her garments as if inviting her to move, to dance, to remember what it felt like to be free. But freedom had its price. Every time she reached for closeness, the world trembled. Every time she loved, something broke. Her desire was both gift and curse, intense enough to bring life, fierce enough to erase what could not endure it. She thought of Shango. His laughter still burned in her memory. His fire still crackled in her blood. Their love was no gentle thing. It was a battle and a surrender all at once. When he touched her, the heavens split apart. When he left, the silence was unbearable. Each reunion was a storm reborn, each parting a wound that never quite healed. Yet it was not Shango alone who haunted her. It was what he represented. He was the mirror in which she saw her own hunger, her own impossibility. She closed her eyes and inhaled the thick scent of rain. The air was alive with promise, and she could feel the world calling her to act. The clouds pressed close, restless and dark, whispering her name as if pleading to be unleashed. Her fingers flexed, and with them the river stirred. A low rumble rolled across the horizon, deep and sensual, a sound that made her skin shiver. The thunder was her heartbeat, the pulse of everything she tried to contain. Yet within her chest there was war. A voice rose inside her, soft, aching, human. If I release it, will I ever be held again? For even the goddess of storms feared loneliness. The power that made her infinite also made her untouchable. No mortal could withstand her love. No god could outlast her winds. She was the breath of change, and to love her was to be undone. She knew this truth as surely as she knew the feel of lightning on her tongue, and still she yearned. Far across the plains, Shango watched the sky darken. He felt her restlessness in the tremor of the earth, in the spark that danced upon the horizon. His own fire flared in response. He knew her storms like he knew his own flame, unpredictable, consuming, necessary. She was calling him without words, and his soul answered. He rose from the heat of his domain, a trail of embers in his wake, and the air between them tightened with expectation.
When he found her, the river glowed with reflected lightning. Oya stood in the shallows, her gaze lost in the shimmer of water and light. She turned at the sound of his approach, her eyes burning with a storm that had not yet found its voice. "You came," she said softly, though her tone carried the weight of thunder. "How could I not?" Shango replied, stepping closer. "The sky burns for you. I burn for you." Her lips curved, not in joy, but in longing. "And yet, every time you touch me, the world breaks." "Let it break," he murmured. "Let it fall apart if it must. What is creation without ruin first?" His words struck something deep within her, a truth she had always known but never dared to accept. To love him was to unleash herself entirely, to strip away every barrier until nothing remained but raw existence. Her winds began to stir, answering his flame. Shango reached out, his hand hovering inches from her skin. The air crackled between them, wind and fire entwined, their energies trembling on the edge of explosion. "You fight your nature," he said, "but it is not your storms that destroy, it is your fear of them." Her breath caught. The wind tangled in her hair, coiling around her neck like a lover's whisper. "If I stop fearing," she said, her voice barely audible, "there will be nothing left. Then let there be nothing, and from that nothing we will begin again." When his hand touched hers, the world ignited. The river surged upward, a column of water spun to mist by her winds. Lightning flared, slicing the sky open as thunder rolled like a sigh from the heavens. Fire met air, heat met motion, and in the collision there was ecstasy. The storm did not rage, it sang. Their bodies moved as forces of nature, inseparable, endless. Each touch was a gust of wind meeting flame, each breath a mingling of destruction and desire. The rain fell in waves around them, hissing upon Shango's fire, turning to steam that wrapped them in a shroud of trembling light. They were the storm, the pulse of the universe made flesh, chaos given rhythm. But even in the height of passion, Oya felt the ache of inevitability. For every heartbeat that joined them, another crack split the world. Trees bent until they broke. Rivers flooded their banks, and the air grew thick with the scent of burning rain. The beauty of their union was matched only by its cost. She pulled away, trembling. Her eyes glistened with tears indistinguishable from rain. "I cannot keep doing this," she whispered.
Every time I reach for you, something dies. Shango's voice was low, rough as thunder fading. And every time you deny yourself, something inside you dies instead. She looked at him then, truly looked. His fire flickered, not with arrogance, but with sorrow. He too was bound by what he was. Flame cannot live without consuming. Wind cannot move without changing what it touches. They were not enemies, they were inevitabilities. The storm around them quieted, but the tension between them did not fade. Oya stepped closer, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw, the warmth beneath his skin. Do you ever wish that we could just stop? He smiled, a sad curve that held no mockery. If we stopped, the world would cease with us. Her breath trembled, part sigh, part sob. Then we are cursed. No, he said, pressing his forehead to hers. We are necessary. The wind sighed, as if tired from the weight of their truth. The rain softened to a whisper, and for a fleeting moment there was calm, a fragile illusion of peace. Oya closed her eyes and felt his warmth seep into her, grounding her in the midst of her own chaos. For one heartbeat, she believed that love could exist without consequence. But the horizon betrayed her. The storm she had held back now demanded release. The air thickened, the earth shuddered, and lightning split the darkness anew. The world would not be denied. Oya stepped back, tears gleaming like stars against her storm-lit skin. Go, she said, her voice breaking like thunder, before I ruin everything we've built. Shango's flame flickered in protest, but he obeyed. He turned away, his fire dimming as he vanished into the rain. And when he was gone, Oya finally let the storm come. It tore through the sky with a sound that was both scream and song, her grief and passion unleashed as one. The wind clawed at the heavens, the rain fell in torrents, and the world was remade beneath her fury. In her sorrow, she destroyed. In her destruction, she became. For such is Oya's truth. Her love is the storm, her longing its eye, and in every gust of wind that follows, the world still remembers the taste of her desire. The storm had been gathering for days, swelling inside her like an unspoken truth. Every breath she took tasted of thunder. Every movement trembled with the weight of what she refused to release. Oya had walked the length of her own heart and found it trembling, torn between the hunger to feel and the fear of what her feeling could do. The air clung to her like heat before the rain, pressing against her skin, whispering her own name in fragments of wind. Above her, the sky churned, dark and alive. Lightning shimmered like veins of light beneath a living skin of cloud. The world felt poised on the edge of something sacred and dangerous. It was not destruction she prepared for, it was revelation. The storm was not her wrath, it was her confession. She stood upon the crest of the river's curve, her garments whipping around her like banners of shadow and flame. The water rose to her ankles, cold and alive, pulsing with the rhythm of her heart. She closed her eyes and let her breath slow, feeling the tremor of the earth, the electric hum in the air, the ache that pulsed through every corner of her being. "Enough," she whispered, to the wind, to the world, to herself. And with that word, she let go. The first wave of thunder rolled through the heavens like a deep moan, the sound of the sky remembering how to breathe. The wind screamed, not in rage, but in ecstasy, swirling around her, lifting her hair, caressing her skin with invisible fingers. Rain burst from the clouds in heavy, rhythmic beats, each drop hot as tears, cold as memory. Her power spilled forth, unrestrained and beautiful. The air became touch, the lightning breath. Her body arched with the force of it, her spine a curve of light beneath the downpour. She felt herself dissolving into her own storm, her boundaries vanishing, her will melting into wind and water. Every gust that tore across the plain was a piece of her longing made visible. Every flash of lightning, a fragment of her heart finally freed. In the midst of it, she felt him. Shango's fire ignited on the horizon, a single pulse of red light against the rolling dark. The rain hissed upon his flame, but it did not die. It danced. He came to her as he always did, drawn not by command, but by recognition, by the knowing that her chaos was his home. He did not speak. Words were useless here. His presence was heat, his silence thunder. The wind met his fire, and the storm shuddered as if gasping. Lightning found the flame, and the sky split in a cascade of white. The air between them quivered, dense and trembling, filled with the scent of ozone and earth. They did not move toward each other. They became the movement, pulled by a gravity older than the world. When his hands found her, they did not grasp, they trembled. He was flame, yet he touched her as if she were the storm that might consume him, and she was. The rain steamed where it met his skin, mist curling around them like breath. Her wind rose in waves, swirling between them, around them, until there was no distinction between body and element, between power and surrender.
She leaned into him, her forehead against his chest, feeling the wild rhythm beneath his skin. His heartbeat thundered, each pulse echoing the storm she had unleashed. "You burn," she breathed. "You breathe," he answered, voice rough as breaking clouds. "Together we live." The storm roared its approval, lightning flashing in cascades of gold and violet. It was not rage that filled the heavens, it was creation, the raw, unfiltered pulse of existence. The world around them bent and shimmered, every drop of rain catching light like fragments of a shattered sun. Oya opened her eyes, and in that moment she saw herself not as goddess or storm, but as pure motion. Every gust, every spark, every heartbeat that ever dared to defy stillness. She felt herself expanding, breaking apart, and reassembling in every drop of rain, every crack of thunder. To surrender was not to lose herself, it was to become infinite.
She threw her head back, and her cry split the sky. It was not pain, it was release, the kind of sound that shakes the bones of creation, that makes even the gods fall silent. Her winds surged outward, touching mountains, seas, and sleeping forests. Rivers overflowed, lightning kissed the earth, and for one eternal instant, everything was alive with her. Shango held her through it all, his fire flaring, his body trembling against hers. The storm wrapped around them both, not as a weapon, but as an embrace. It was the universe remembering how to love itself through chaos. The air was heavy with their union, wind entwined with flame, light with dark, destruction with renewal. When the climax came, it was not an end, but a transformation. The lightning no longer struck, it shimmered softly through the rain. The winds no longer screamed, they sighed. Fire no longer sought to conquer, but to warm. The entire world exhaled. In that calm, Oya stood trembling, her body still humming with the pulse of what she had unleashed. The rain had softened into a gentle mist, clinging to her skin like a lover reluctant to let go. Steam rose where her winds had met Shango's flame, curling upward in delicate spirals that painted the sky in silver. She looked to him, her eyes wide, vulnerable, almost human. She whispered, "It never ends." Shango smiled faintly, his hand brushing her cheek, his thumb tracing the line where rain met heat. He said to her, "Nor should it. This is who you are, the storm that feels, the wind that loves." She wanted to speak, to argue, to say she was tired of breaking the world each time she felt deeply, but the words dissolved upon her lips, carried away by the wind. For the first time she understood that her power was not her curse, it was her truth. Her longing was not weakness, it was her divine heartbeat.
She reached up and touched his chest, feeling the steady rhythm beneath her fingers. His flame pulsed beneath her hand, alive, unafraid. "You will fade," she said softly. "I always do," he murmured. "But so does every storm, and still the world remembers the rain." Her lips curved, a fragile smile, the kind that comes only after surrender. Around them, the earth glistened, washed clean by her tears and her fury alike. The scent of ozone hung heavy in the air, sharp and sweet, the perfume of renewal. Oya turned her gaze to the horizon. The clouds were breaking now, revealing a sky so vast it seemed reborn. The winds danced softly at her feet, gentler than they had ever been, as if exhausted yet content. In her chest, the ache had not vanished, but it no longer consumed her. It pulsed quietly like the tide. She looked once more at Shango, and for the briefest instant he appeared as something more than fire, as tenderness wrapped in flame. Then he was gone, his heat dissolving into the mist. The last echo of thunder rolled across the plain, low and distant, like the final heartbeat of a fading dream. The rain eased into silence. The wind, her eternal companion, brushed her cheek in quiet reverence, carrying the faint scent of him away into the world. And there, beneath the trembling dawn, Oya stood, bare, radiant, transformed. The storm was over, but its echo lived within her. She had not been broken by her desire. She had been remade by it. The river at her feet glowed faintly, reflecting a sky that had forgotten its fear. The world smelled of wet earth and beginning. Oya exhaled, and the breeze moved with her, soft and alive, whispering the promise that no storm, however fierce, is forever. Her power, her love, her longing, they were not opposites, but one breath, one truth. And as the first light touched her skin, she understood that surrender had never meant defeat. It meant becoming.
The world awoke beneath a new silence. It was not the silence of emptiness, but of renewal, the hush that follows when something vast has spoken its truth. The storm was gone, though its memory lingered in every trembling leaf, in the glistening curve of every blade of grass. The rivers, swollen and gleaming, carried whispers of her power to distant lands. The air smelled of birth and ending, of ash and bloom intertwined. Oya stood alone at the river's edge, the same place where her surrender had begun. The ground was slick beneath her feet, cool and rich, darkened by the rain she had wept upon it. Her hair clung to her shoulders, heavy with water and light, and the winds, once wild and ungoverned, now circled her softly, like loyal children soothed after their tantrum. She was no longer the tempest she had been, yet she was not less for it. The storm had not emptied her, it had revealed her. In the aftermath, the world felt fragile, trembling on the cusp of clarity. Trees that had bent now stood taller, cleansed of their old weight. Flowers battered by the rain began to open anew, their colors more vivid than before. Even the river itself seemed to hum with a deeper resonance, as though its current carried not just water, but understanding. Oya watched these changes with quiet wonder. She had brought chaos and destruction, yes, but within it, the promise of life had taken root. The realization settled over her like the first rays of dawn. She had not been born to preserve stillness, but to awaken it. Her storms were not punishment, they were truth. In every tear, in every gust of wind, there had been meaning. Painful, yes, but necessary. She walked along the riverbank, her fingers trailing over the surface of the water. The ripples spread outward in delicate rings, reflecting her face in shifting fragments. Once she would have feared such fragility, the reminder that even a goddess can be broken. Now she saw it for what it was, the poetry of impermanence. What is power if it does not change? What is love if it does not risk loss? For the first time in ages, she smiled. The wind picked up slightly as if responding to that simple gesture, wrapping around her in a gentle embrace. It carried the scent of distant fire, faint but familiar. Shango's presence lingered in the warmth of the horizon, though he himself was gone. His fire still burned somewhere beyond sight, feeding on her winds,
as her winds would one day return to feed his flame. Their connection was no longer a battle, no longer a need to consume. It was a rhythm, a pulse.
She closed her eyes and felt him there, not as an ache, but as a steady thrum beneath her skin. "You are never truly gone," she whispered into the air. The breeze answered her, weaving through her hair with tender insistence. For a moment, it was as if he had spoken back. And perhaps, in his way, he had. The land around her began to shift in color, the heavy clouds dissolving into a mosaic of soft pinks and golds. Dawn spread like a slow exhalation, its light washing over the water until it shimmered like molten glass. Oya lifted her face to it, letting the warmth seep into her, drying the last remnants of rain from her lashes. In that light, she looked neither victorious nor defeated, only real. The goddess of storms had become something gentler, yet no less formidable. Her essence had deepened, layered with stillness and wisdom. She had learned that destruction is only half the truth of transformation. The other half is patience. To destroy was to make space. To wait was to allow new life to rise in that space. Her gaze wandered to the horizon, where the plains stretched endlessly, green and alive. There would be other storms, other awakenings, other moments when she would feel the weight of her power pressing to be freed. She did not fear that anymore. She would not resist her nature, nor would she let it consume her. She would move as the wind moves, sometimes fierce, sometimes tender, but always true. The spirits of the river stirred, rising like mist to greet her. They bowed, their forms shimmering in the morning light. "Mother of change," they murmured, voices like ripples in still water. "The world breathes anew because of you." Oya inclined her head, her expression serene. "The world breathes because it dares to break, and I am only its breath." The spirits smiled and faded back into the river, leaving her in the soft hum of their gratitude. Oya turned her gaze skyward. The clouds were thin now, streaked like brushstrokes across a newly washed canvas. In them she saw not the memory of rage, but the artistry of balance. The wind rose again, brushing against her face with a lover's gentleness, and she realized that even in solitude, she was never alone. The world itself was her companion, its endless cycle of birth and decay, its quiet faith in renewal.
As she began to walk away from the river, her footsteps left no mark upon the softened earth. Each movement was a prayer, silent, fluid, alive. Behind her, the storm she had unleashed was already becoming legend. Mortals would speak of it for generations. The night the skies wept fire and rain. The night the goddess of winds was seen dancing with flame. They would remember her as fierce, as terrible, as magnificent. Few would understand the truth that her greatest act had not been the storm, but the stillness that followed. The air shimmered with her passing. Where she had walked, the grass stood straighter, the flowers lifted their faces, and the river sung a softer song. The balance had been restored, not perfect, but breathing, real. At the edge of the plains,
She paused one last time and looked back. The landscape was unrecognizable, renewed, reborn, alive with possibility. Her heart swelled with quiet pride. The storm had changed her as much as it had changed the world. In her chest, the old ache remained, a reminder of the fire she had loved, the lives she had touched, the storms yet to come. But now it was a gentle ache, one she carried without shame. She was no longer a goddess fleeing her nature, she was a goddess who understood it. Oya spread her arms, and the wind answered. It swirled around her, playful, affectionate, tugging at her hair and clothing. She laughed, a sound bright as lightning, soft as rain, and let herself rise. The earth fell away beneath her, and the sky opened wide, vast and familiar. The world turned golden beneath her, bathed in light that shimmered like the breath of new beginnings. From above, she could see the traces of her storm, rivers newly carved, forests glistening with rebirth, fire-tinged clouds drifting into peace. It was all as it should be. She closed her eyes, letting the wind carry her higher, lighter, freer. In the space between thunder and calm, between grief and grace, Oya existed, unbound, eternal, endlessly becoming. The storm was over, but Oya, goddess of winds, of change, of passion and renewal, remained. And in the hush that followed, the world whispered her name, not in fear, but in gratitude.
The river glides in silence now, yet within that silence hums the echo of old storms. The world remembers her, not as the fury that tore through its heart, but as the breath that taught it to live again. And Oya, somewhere between sky and memory, feels that truth settle over her like the warmth of fading light. She has danced with destruction, embraced desire, and emerged not purified, but whole. Wholeness, she has learned, is not peace. It is motion. It is the pulse that keeps the universe trembling with becoming. She looks down upon the earth she has loved and wounded, and for the first time she sees no difference between the two. What she destroys, she also renews. What she loves, she must let go. In the tender ache of her heart, she feels both birth and ending, two faces of the same breath. The wind that once screamed now sighs, and its whisper carries the confession of every living thing. To exist is to change. Her eyes, dark as storm clouds, soften as she gazes toward the horizon. There, dawn and dusk meet in an endless exchange, the sun setting and rising in the same motion. It reminds her of Shango, the fire that once consumed her. His name still hums in the marrow of thunder, in the taste of rain upon the wind. Their love was never meant to last, yet its impermanence gave it meaning. The memory burns in her veins not as regret, but as devotion to the truth that passion is a storm, violent, fleeting, and alive. The goddess breathes, and the world stirs in answer. Each gust that moves across the plains carries her essence, a caress invisible but felt. She wonders, as gods sometimes do, whether mortals understand what it means to love as she does, to give oneself so completely that even the act of breaking becomes sacred. Perhaps they do, in moments when their hearts tremble, when they reach for something they know they cannot keep. Perhaps that is what draws them to her, the promise of transformation through loss. Oya knows that passion is not merely desire, it is the hunger for life itself, the pulse that insists on motion when stillness tempts. Change is her gift and her curse, the endless folding of beginnings into endings, endings into beginnings. She has learned to cherish it, the way one cherishes the taste of rain on the tongue, fleeting but infinite in its remembrance.
Around her, the air shimmers with warmth. The clouds move like thoughts through an ancient mind, shifting form, yet never ceasing. The rhythm comforts her. She belongs to that rhythm, the endless cycle of creation and undoing. Once she had tried to fight it, to hold her storm still in her palms, to make the world stay quiet. But quietness is not life, it is waiting, and she was never meant to wait. She was meant to move, to stir, to breathe life into the stillness. She speaks softly, her voice carried by the wind across oceans and deserts alike. Everything I touch changes, she says. Everything that changes lives. The words ripple through the air like prayer, settling into the hearts of those who will never know from where they came. A woman standing by the river will feel them as courage. A man lost in grief will feel them as forgiveness. A child watching lightning dance across the sky will feel them as wonder. Oya smiles, unseen, knowing that her storms still live wherever change dares to begin. The scent of rain fades. The skies blush into gold. The world exhales. And in that breath, her story continues, not as legend, but as pulse. She has become something more than wind, more than goddess, more than storm. She is the memory of movement, the sacred tremor between chaos and creation. She exists in every rebirth, in every moment when something must die for something else to begin. And yet within that vastness, there remains tenderness. The same tenderness that once bound her to Shango, to the mortals who whispered her name, to the rivers that carried her reflection. It lives in her still. The softness behind the power, the ache behind the thunder. It is this duality that defines her. Strength laced with longing, rage softened by grace. As she drifts higher into the pale expanse of morning, Oya wonders if even eternity changes. Perhaps it does. Perhaps immortality is only another form of motion, an endless unfolding of self across time. If so, she welcomes it. To change is to stay alive. To remain untouched is to fade. She will not fade. The wind begins to sing again, a melody that feels both ancient and newly born. It is the sound of leaves trembling, of rivers colliding with the sea, of lovers breathing the same breath before parting. It is her song, and through it she speaks once more, not to the world, but to the quiet that follows every storm.
"Do not fear the breaking," she murmurs. "It is only the sound of becoming." And in that whisper, something eternal unfolds. The horizon shimmers, a seam of gold and violet. Below her, life stirs in small, radiant ways. Sprouts pushing through damp soil, wings testing the air, hearts learning to love again after loss. All of it is her doing, yet none of it belongs to her. The beauty of her power lies in its impermanence, in the way it gives and then releases endlessly. Oya lets the last of her form dissolve into the wind. What remains is sensation, the brush of air against the cheek, the sigh that precedes rain, the thrill of thunder rolling through a restless heart. She is everywhere now, in every movement, every change, every pulse that refuses stillness. And though the world may forget her name, it will always remember her essence. The whisper before the storm, the kiss that tastes like lightning, the silence that follows renewal. For Oya is not only a goddess of winds and tempests, she is the sacred truth behind all transformation. She is the desire that becomes wisdom, the passion that births peace, the storm that becomes sky. So when the wind rises unexpectedly, carrying the scent of rain and fire, when hearts quicken at the tremor of thunder far away, remember her. Remember the goddess who taught the world that to love is to change, and to change is to live. For even in her absence she remains. The air trembles once more, soft, deliberate, eternal. It carries a single whisper, faint but certain, like the breath before creation itself. I am the wind that breaks and mends, the pulse between endings and beginnings. I am Oya.